So, all right, now that we are recording here, as a starting point for this meeting, what I just passed out and what we'll get up on the screen here for those attending via Zoom is our Housing and Neighborhood Subcommittee framework. And we call it a framework because it's supposed to be just an introduction to the topic, both what we see this committee working on, and then in addition to that, input that we received from the first phase of public engagement related to the comprehensive plan. So in summary, what we're here today to do, and as part of this subcommittee, is to address the neighborhood characteristics of Winona, housing goals and policies to achieve them, as well as housing choice. And we talked a lot about housing choice during our orientation for this entire process. And housing choice is really increasing the number of units and options for people in the city of Winona, so that you have options beyond a simple single family home, an apartment, or a duplex, for instance, a twin home. So what other options are out there? Missing middle housing, and we'll talk about that. Some examples of discussion topics or focus areas you'll see on this list here. It's everything from reviewing the characteristics of the existing housing stock, economic drivers and need for housing in Winona, housing development impacts on sustainability, fiscal impacts of housing development and resiliency, and then ideas and input from the first phase of public engagement, which is on the following sheets. Overall, the committee product is to, in accordance with the City of Winona's 2045 vision, values, and comprehensive plan overarching themes, housing goals, objectives, and actions identified by this subcommittee are recommended to the steering committee for incorporation into the comprehensive plan. So essentially, the work that we do here forms the basis for the housing chapter in the comprehensive plan. Again, our timeline starting now and extending through till August. And at August, we'll hopefully be able to identify a spokesperson from this committee that'll be the one who's responsible for bringing forward the committee's recommendation, of course, with staff as well, to the steering committee. So with that, one thing I wanted to do, since we are all just meeting for the first time and we have introduced ourselves, is again go around and ask each one of you, number one, why are you interested in this topic? And number two, what's your big idea for housing in Winona? If it's that one thing that you just wanted to say right away, before we take a look at all this data, all this information, what's the one thing that you would want to share with the group? And I'll go first. Of course, I'm very, very interested in this because it's part of my position as city planner, but I'm even more interested in it just because of the potential that I see in Winona for different styles of housing. Given our walkability and the characteristics that we have in the core area of the city, I see our potential for increasing housing choice as really, really strong and something that I'm very, very interested in. My big idea is to allow housing choice in terms of duplexes or triplexes with an owner-occupied classification. So you can have a house that could go from a single-family home to a duplex, but that duplex would remain owner-occupied. So you would still maintain the character of the neighborhood, but you'd have an additional housing unit as well on the same parcel. So I'll hand it over to Nick.
Nick Larson. My interest, I guess, is what I do for a living with the city of Winona, and housing is a very big aspect of it. And I thoroughly enjoy helping people out and I guess trying to find a more affordable housing. My big idea of what I would like to see come out of this is how we can incorporate smaller footprint homes to be able to increase the affordability of it for multiple sectors of the population, which take into account reducing, messing around with the zoning and lot size maximums or minimums, so we could create more affordable single family homes either for sale or for rent.
So I guess my interest in this is just I've owned rental property, both student housing and market rate. for a little over 30 years. And currently we're working on a new apartment building, which hopefully will help the overall need for more housing. You know, I guess on a daily basis, I get phone calls for people looking for apartments or a place to live. And, you know, I always think, you know, well, this apartment building opened or whatever, and you think, oh, the calls will slow down, but it just never does. So it'd be nice to figure out a way to, I guess, help more people have a place to live in the Winona area.
I'm interested because I know absolutely nothing about housing, and I know that's probably a weird thing to say for somebody who wants to serve on a committee like this, but I know it's really important. And in my role at Winona Area Public Schools, we're obviously looking to increase enrollment, and we need more families to live in Winona. There's a statistic that I always get wrong about the number of people who work in Winona but don't live in Winona, and you know, obviously I'd like to see that change. As far as a big idea, I really like the idea of walkable neighborhoods. Another reason why I'm here is I was very disappointed with what happened with the Broadway Road diet. And so whatever happens out of this committee, I want to know how I can be a stronger advocate for the ideas that we come up with and for the ideas that the city champions.
Good morning. I've worked in community development for quite a few years. Always had a passion for the housing side of things. Started out helping people to rehabilitate their homes in Winona. And one of the things that I think is so important, whether it's a big idea or not, is that our existing housing stock, which is very old, but it's one of the most affordable aspects of housing we already have in place, but much of it is in need of repair. So coming up with programs to continue the rehabilitation that we've done over many years in the city. But the issue is some of the federal and state regulations are making it much more difficult to tap into funding to help people who are low and moderate income fix up their homes.
Hi. So one of the reasons that I am interested in this committee is that through our agency, we have utilized scattered site units for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. And with the overproduction of property units in high income brackets and the underproduction of units for those with below the area medium income, I think that it's really important that we look at supportive housing options that can support that that demographic. And also I'm a landlord as well, and I'm constantly getting calls from people who are looking for places, and we just cannot keep up with the amount of individuals who need housing at all scales of the area medium income. So I think that it's really important that we look at this, and I think one of my big ideas or ideas that I'm working on is I'd really like to utilize more scattered site units within the existing property that we have to, as we said, do rehabilitation to some of those existing properties and utilize them as scattered site for those who have you know, below the area medium income.
I'm going to go ahead and call on our friends on Zoom here. Rachel, you look ready to say something.
I'm always ready to say something. Again, my name is Rachel. I have been around Winona since about 2012, and my first foray into Winona was living at the Winona Catholic Worker that was doing emergency shelter for homeless individuals at that time. And like I said, I have been working with the Hub program for a couple of years and have worked with a lot of folks who are struggling with food and housing insecurity and who have been homeless or are currently homeless. So I am also very interested in low-income housing of all kinds. And I would say that my big idea or the thing that I've been thinking about most in this is talking about integrating housing. I think in Winona, our housing is pretty segregated in terms of socioeconomic and racial differences. And I'm interested in talking about how we could make our neighborhoods more integrated so that people are living next to each other and getting to know each other and our neighbors with each other.
Amanda?
Thanks. I'm really interested in all of these things. So I'm sitting here sifting through all the aspects of housing that I would like to consider and struggling to pin down the one that appeals to me most. But I think it's along the lines of what Carlos was saying with ownership options that increase density, but also support the local residents of the people who are acting in a landlord capacity. I think the houses that are cared for best often have the homeowner living in close proximity to their rental, especially right inside there. And at Habitat for Humanity, we are exploring options for building with fourplexes, duplexes, triplexes, things of that nature that support things like that. I'm also really interested in repairs and livability for adults who are aging independently. So along the lines of what Lucy was talking about with repairs and preserving our aging housing stock, recognizing that the cost of construction exceeds affordability for so many people, how can we preserve as many of the old homes as we have, making best use of the land for the ones that are not salvageable, as some of those hopefully can become resources for new housing. And so I think my big ideas are all mixed up in that stew.
It's becoming quite a hearty stew. Deborah, would you like to add? Deborah, would you like to add to it?
Just to say that mostly I'm here to learn. As I said, I'm retired and I am single, and I am getting scared. I have to go back to work right now because the fear that my income won't be enough to keep me in the place that I'm renting right now, because I'm sure they're going to be going up. Along with that, just where I worked with the school district with family-based services for 18 years and had an opportunity to see families that didn't necessarily qualify for Section 8 that were large, but trying to find affordable housing for themselves. It's larger families can't afford the rent that is required when you have the homes that have the room. So anyway, I'm more here to learn and concerned about retirees that are living at home that can afford to stay in apartments. I guess that's it.
That was an absolutely fantastic segue, because so much of this first meeting is talking about some of the background information for our community. And with that, I'm going to turn it right back over to City Planner Carlos Espinoza.
All right, the next thing that we'll transition here to now is our existing 2007 Comprehensive Plan Housing Chapter. And I'm going to hand that out to people who are here, and we'll get it up on the screen for those who are attending via Zoom. And once we get to the page, we'll go through this section. And essentially, what this subcommittee will be doing is updating this section from the 2007 Comprehensive Plan to be part of this plan that'll project out to the year 2045. So in our 2007 comp plan, we were looking to the year 2030, which is coming up quicker than I think we'd all like to admit. But the housing plan is shown on this page that starts on page 49 of the overall comprehensive plan. And you can see it starts out with some issues that are identified first, things to take a look at. From that plan, we're looking at things like demographic changes, innovation, tax exempt housing, cost of development, and again, that rental owner occupied housing balance. From there, it goes on to goals and objectives. The goals include preserving the integrity and character of the housing in Winona's older central neighborhoods to enhance the livability of the entire committee. And if we flip the page, the next goal is a balanced housing supply, rental housing improvements, and each one of those has objectives underneath. Then it goes into policies and actions. The first policy being maintain and enhance the viability of single-family housing in older neighborhoods. And there's a number of different instances of how that can be done.
So we do have some missing pages, but we'll get the correct information out, at least the copy I have will go from 49 to 51.
Oh, the printer didn't print the backside.
But
All right.
I have an actual comprehensive plan that everybody can look at. So we'll get the right information out there.
Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, we'll get the right information out there, the complete information from the printer. So I'll just continue with the policies. The next policy is to encourage mixed use and mixed income infill and redevelopment. Encourage creation of new traditional neighborhoods. Continue to assess housing needs. Encourage historic preservation. Maintain and enhance the appearance and livability of and affordability of rental housing. And finally, in terms of student housing, continuing to work with the city's institutions of higher education to ensure that student housing they provide is appropriately sited and designed. So again, overall, what we're looking to do is to update this section of the 2007 plan. And what we'd ask you to do between this meeting and the next meeting is to really kind of take a close look at that and see what you think still applies and what won't apply any longer or may not be as applicable at this point in time. And bring that to the next meeting. So that'll be your homework, is to take a look at this section and suggest any changes that may need to be made. Of course, there's a number of these that are still pertinent and still important, and there's no reason why we shouldn't continue to focus on these things moving into the future. But we want to account for all the change that has happened between 2007 and now. All right. In addition to the housing plan and the homework for the next meeting, we want to give everybody some additional background information. And I have paper copies for everybody here, but online we also will show what we're going to move into now. But we also have a listing of all of the documents that we have for this subcommittee. So what we'll do is we'll send out a link to where all these documents are posted on the city website so that you have access to them, especially for those that are attending via Zoom today. So the first background information that we'd like to pass out is our most recent comprehensive housing needs assessment for the city of Winona. And this was done by Maxfield Research and Consulting in 2016. And so this is our most up-to-date housing analysis. And what I just passed out and what you will see on the screen here is the executive summary. This report is actually over 100 pages long. Lucy has a full report in front of her right now. So there's a lot of data that we have here, but we wanted to focus this committee on the executive summary. And what the executive summary talks about is, and really delves into, is what types of housing are needed over the next number of years. And this was projected, I believe, out to 2030 was the projection year in this study. So this is another point of information that we'd like subcommittee members to take a look at. And I'll hand it over to Lucy and Nick if you wanted to comment at all on the housing study.
I guess my comment would be, so this study is from 2016. And you have the executive summary. What's really good, and I think we'll be moving into this piece of information next, is that since that study where they projected different types of housing and how many units were needed based on demographics, Nick Larson in our office has tracked, through data we have in our office of new single family, new market rate, new rental. How have we kept up with what the projected need is and what areas haven't we met? So we have so much good data in addition to this. This is from 2016, but Nick has the information of what we've done since 2016 to help meet these goals. And that might be good for the committee to see where we need to improve and where we've been meeting our goals. So.
Along with other information, that kind of one of John's ideas, what he brought up is closer, okay, is the commuting data, the in and out of our workers. So we have updated information from that from Minnesota Deed, and along with on the city website, where if you just Google City of Winona housing study, you can see the study in its entirety. And if there are subsections that any subcommittee members would like further detail on, you can just get a hold of me and I can provide that information to you.
Okay, that is the first big piece of information. And the second, as Lucy mentioned, is the housing task force that was convened by the mayor, following up on the housing study that created a number of different recommendations for addressing housing needs in the near-term future. And I'll go ahead and pass that out now, and Luke will bring it up on the screen for everybody.
Carlos, if I can add a little bit. So this task force report really gets down to the specifics and the different types of programs that are out there to help build the housing capacity with different styles of housing and where the focus should be. For example, if we're helping someone with housing, should there be a low and moderate income component of that if we're using our public resources? And that's one thing that's discussed in this task force recommendation. I would say this task force recommendation is a very detailed, kind of getting into the weeds type of document. Whereas what we will be working on for the comprehensive plan is more of the 30,000 foot view, making goals, objectives, and recommendations, you know, that could then drill down into a document like the task force report. So that's a very detailed report, whereas some of the other things you've seen are a little bit broader view. Just wanted to point that out.
Definitely. And our intent, as Lucy mentioned with this, is to, with the comprehensive plan, we're taking that 30,000 foot view of things. So trying to soak up as much of this information as possible, and then pull back a little bit and take a look at things in general and how can we better position the city to provide increased housing choice into the future. And that's really what we're looking to answer as we move through our next few meetings here. So we wanted to give you all of this information so you have it at least. I know it's a lot, but it'll give you a great introduction to kind of what we're looking at in terms of housing need moving forward. So what we'd like to transition to next is taking a look at our projections that we're working off of in the comprehensive plan. And we'll bring it up the slide on the screen here. All right, so the projections that we're taking a look at with the comprehensive plan, it starts out, we take a look back to 1960 and analyze city growth since that time and project out to 2045. The last bullet point on this slide is our projection for the year 2045, which is 28,000 people. You'll note that that is only approximately 500 more people than were in the city in 2010. So in 2010, we had a population of 27,592, and we're projecting an increase of 500 people from that number. However, since 2010, we did see a decrease in the amount of people living in Winona. And the 2010 census number the 2020 census number that came out, 25,948, We believe this is low due to the counting time period. It was during the first wave of COVID when we believe a number of college students, for instance, may not have been in the city and did not answer their census forms. Rather, what we think is a little bit more accurate is a number that just came out in March from the American Community Survey, which estimates our current population to be approximately 26,772. So we believe it went down, but not as much as what the census number is. And so going from there, in 2025, our projection is 27,000. So adding people slowly but surely over the next 25 years here. And our projections in terms of taking a look at how they compare, in 2025, it's 27,000. If we were to use the 2010 census number, that 26,000 and add 250, because every 5 years you have approximately 250 people added to the city, historically since 1960, you get 26,198. And in contrast, our 2016 housing study that we just referenced forecast our population in 2025 to be 28,815. So you see that 27,000 number is kind of coming in right in the middle. And I think that's why the planning team feels relatively comfortable with the projection of 28,000 for 2045. Now, would we like to see potentially more than that? And can we enable more people to live here through the policies that are enacted by the comprehensive plan? Yes, I think we can. But what we wanted to do is set a realistic expectation based on past growth and what we've seen at larger jurisdictional areas. So looking out to 2045, the state demographer, as well as other state agencies, are actually projecting a decline in population for not only the state, but the region and Winona County as well. So we see that the city can be an exception to that based on our historic growth and the work that we're doing right now in the comprehensive plan, as well as all of the interests that I think people have expressed here and that I hear about on a daily basis in terms of people wanting to live in Winona, but having a hard time finding a place. So if we can open up the housing choice for people, I think that will provide room for growth in terms of our population moving forward here. So what we're looking at is a 28,000 total number until 2045. And so that's kind of the context that we wanted to talk about housing choice, and that we see steady growth, but maybe the main thing is the projections don't have us increasing significantly in population through the year 2045. So there will be growth, but we want to make sure that we take a realistic viewpoint of that growth. So.
And to add into that, I do want to note that these projection numbers have gone around and around with the steering committee for the overall comprehensive plan update about 3 times now. And they have become a bit of a talking point for that steering committee. And then also it was touched on, growth was touched on with the city council as well. And I do want to take a moment here for this subcommittee to maybe reflect on what your goals were that you said, why you were interested in this subcommittee and your goals for housing in our community, and whether or not you feel that these projections of growing to about 28,000 people in the next 22 years will actually be a good fit or a good appropriateness. Is there anybody want to respond to that, or maybe take some time to think about that for a quick minute?
I guess just a thought was, when we did the 2010 census, not only the housing association, but there were a lot more people involved in getting the student numbers counted. So I do think there were a significant number that because of COVID weren't counted. So I think we're higher than obviously what the census showed for 2020. And obviously Winona State's counts are down. So somewhere I think that number is probably somewhere in the middle, as you guys had reflected. So hopefully we can grow the community.
I would just add that I think with the demand that employers have for employees and the percentage of people who are commuters, I think that if we increase the housing stock, we would see people rapidly come in to fill it. So I think that our growth is constrained by access to housing, and that if we prioritize the addition of units across the affordability spectrum, we could see growth numbers even potentially exceed those. I think one of the reasons we do see the low population change is simply because we haven't got housing for people to move into.
I just want to note with the population numbers that even though it's not a large growth, I believe it's more workforce that we are bringing in, because since the housing study and the work done by the housing task force, we've added over, I believe, 400 units within the city of Winona, housing units. At the same time, our population has gone down. So that also comes into play with average family size, which is also decreasing. So that's just another aspect to consider when we look at the population growth projections.
I think one thing that I would add to that is that the workers who are in most demand are often the workers who are paid the least. And so if we're looking at like the service industries and those who are making lower wage, they are the ones who are in the most demand, and they won't come and fill those positions, which will hurt employers if there is not housing for them that is affordable at that income level.
Yeah, and I've been thinking a lot about population change and demographic change in terms of racial and ethnic diversity in our community. And I think that all of Minnesota, all of the United States is getting more and more racially and ethnically diverse. And I think as a community, if we want to maintain our growth, and if we want to, invite and encourage younger folks to stay either post-college or post-high school, we have to make sure that we have a really inclusive community, both culturally, but also in terms of housing opportunity and job opportunity. So I think that in all of these subcommittees, we need to be thinking about that inclusivity question, and like, how are we bringing people of color, younger people, people with different ethnic backgrounds, people who speak different languages, who maybe were born in different countries, how we can bring them to the table and make sure that they feel welcome here and don't feel like they have to live in a big city to feel safe and included.
Yeah, I thought that was well said, Rachel. And I'd also add that it'd be nice to set up housing easy transitions for people in the town as well. So if you are a student in that student housing and you graduate and you get a job that is either in Winona or allows you to stay in Winona, what's your next option? If you don't want to live in the student housing anymore, then when you're done with that apartment or condo or whatever, where's your first house for your family? And then after that, if you want a little bit more land, where's the next house? So, and I think that that's important to keeping some of these college graduates that we have here, or high school graduates.
Just one other comment. I would like to go on with when you were talking about the service workers. Even though I worked with family-based, that was a part-time job, and my most work experience has been with the restaurant industry. Only one time did I work in where I actually got paid vacation. I was at Winona State University as their catering manager, and that was the only time in my life I ever worked a job that I got paid vacation and all the benefits that go on. And I did get a 401k there, but when I left that position, I ended up needing to use that, the 401k to supplement my income while I was not working. So anyway, with that, saying definitely the service industry is one that makes it very difficult to maintain the rent. As you were saying, we have all these new apartments, but I see what's being charged. I can't even come close to paying what I've been told is the asking price right now for the new apartments. So anyway, I'm just saying that we have more, but there's still more unaffordable for many people that are in jobs that don't have benefits.
Thank you all very much. Those were great, insightful comments. I feel that there's a lot of like-mindedness on this committee. There's a lot of identified issues with our current housing, and you are all very well plugged in. You obviously represent a broad swath of our community and understand the issues related to housing. This contextualized nature of what we have provided to you today, going through the 2016 housing study, the 2007 comprehensive plan, the housing task force recommendations, and the projections, all have a lot of interplay with the other 11 topics of the comprehensive plan. We've already begun to touch on them in our conversations today. Economic development, how are we going to have members of our community in a modern service economy who can actually afford to live in our community? How can we make sure that those who are in different income brackets can then progress to different housing choice as they grow in their careers and as they develop in their families? How can we make sure that people who are traditionally not part of or not considered in our housing policy are going to be considered to do so? And that really touches on a couple elements. I want to highlight the three themes that we are going to be asking questions related to all three of you. And we will be very pointed in asking you as we get to our goals, objectives, and strategy proposals for the actual comprehensive plan in how are we addressing equity? How are we addressing technological advancements as we move more toward remote work, for example? Can we attract more people to live and play and want to work from home in our community? And how can we also take a look at those, excuse me, and how else can we make sure that we are actually asking those questions and putting those questions into our policy documents? Some of the other elements here, for example, looking at land use, we have a large zoning map in the middle of our table right now. And we'll pull that up on the screen as soon as I transition this over to Carlos. But a lot of our community is really focused on lower density, or even though we nominally might say medium density of 1 to 4 units. This is that housing choice conversation that we were just talking about. This committee won't specifically be making land use recommendations, but it's important for us to understand the dovetail nature of the recommendations from this committee with that land use chapter and that land use subcommittee, who might be looking at our zoning map and wondering how can we promote the goals of the housing committee's recommendations, for example. And I'll turn it over to Carlos and pull that map up for our friends on Zoom.
And so we have one last question here that we wanted to talk over before we kind of wrap things up here. And just taking a look at the map that'll be up on the screen here and the map that's in front of you. We can go into the different zoning districts and how they apply, but the last question that I wanted to pose for subcommittee members is, where do you see within the city of Winona, where do you see the biggest opportunity for housing growth or change or inclusion of additional housing units? What's a specific geographic area? One area that I take a look at is in and around the downtown area, taking a look at how we could increase housing choice in that location, just given its proximity to the different amenities that we have in the downtown area, grocery stores, employment opportunities, entertainment opportunities. So to me, I think that that's one area of the city that we could really take a look at for increased housing choice. And so I'd like to open it up to the subcommittee members. Geographic location in the city, where do you think there's opportunity?
Carlos, I think an idea for geographical opportunity would be, I'm going to just kind of focus in on the east side where we have our strip malls and Walmart, and mainly just those building types to try to increase density where we have retailer service on a single level building. Whereas if those were 3-story buildings with services on the main level, we could have housing above that. And how do we look at that area over there where there are some vacant areas owned by private properties? How could we help market those areas, potentially have those developed into mixed use opportunities for retail service along with housing, which also then ties into walkability and lack of having to use a vehicle to go to the Walgreens or the Target or the Walmart to fill your family's needs.
I see an infill opportunity in parts of Winona where we see houses going through the forfeiture process, and also where we see houses that have gone into a state of disrepair, where people might be interested in selling that house, or where the house may have become vacant, or where there might be some vacant land. And we could build building types that accommodate a little more density than what was maybe previously there. So that could happen really probably throughout that orange area.
And this is Carlos again. I'll just note another opportunity that I see just as city planner here, and that is all the subdivision area south of Highway 61. Potentially allowing the opportunity for owner-occupied duplexes in the subdivision areas, especially considering the size of the structures in those areas and our declining household size. What we're going to end up having in the future are very large houses with smaller family sizes living in them. So how can we adapt those larger houses to make it affordable for a new family moving in, but then perhaps having a mother-in-law suite or another dwelling unit on the same property in the same structure, and allowing it to be put in as of right, so that you can just do it, provided that there's an owner-occupied status to the property. So that's another opportunity that I would see moving forward here. Any other comments?
This might sound strange, but I always thought about those small homes or whatever, making like a, what do you call it? Like a trailer court of small homes and it'd be geared towards senior citizens and whatever. Anyway, it's just something I thought of when that spot over in Goodview was open that had been a trailer park, and it's doing something else now. But anyway, I thought, God, that'd be kind of neat to have a bunch of small homes there and seniors living there and have a community center in the middle or whatever. It's different.
Yeah, I kind of to piggyback off that with the community center, I think for, the service industry workers, the two geographic areas that were already mentioned are really important, being the downtown and over on the east end of Winona by the strip malls and other infrastructure over there. And I think once we start increasing the density of those areas in housing, and I know this has been talked about, but just to kind of bring it up again, it's really important to maintain that community space, as in if we start condensing what are often already small lots downtown, the people who have those lots are going to definitely want to be able to have spaces that are parks and nature and walking trails. And I know that's been an ongoing commitment in the city of Winona, but just to make sure that we really address that moving forward as we make it more dense.
Definitely, and that goes right into this topic's connection with other subcommittees, transportation, park and recreation. When you live in an area, getting to not only where you need to go, but also where you want to go to is very, very important. So maintaining those connections and accessibility to green space. Any other comments on this question? Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up for our first meeting today. Again, what we'll do for our next meeting is ask everyone to take a look at the 2007 section of the housing plan and come to us with any additions and or changes that you would suggest after taking a look at some of the information that we provided so far. As well, at the next meeting, in addition to that, we will talk about the input from community engagement, phase 1, and from the steering committee. And that is summarized in the framework section, the first document that we went through. Luke will pull it up here. And so when you go to page 2, 3, and 4 of that document, you'll see what we heard from the community when we talked to over 2,000 people as part of our first phase of community engagement related to the comprehensive plan. So please take a look at that, as well as 2007 and what we produced with that comp plan for our next meeting. And in terms of meeting date, we'd like to take a look at meeting the end of May here. And so since we have a few minutes, it would be great to see if we can try and indicate a general meeting time and date. I'm not sure if Thursday mornings seem to work good for individuals here. Seems as though we have a pretty good participation here. So it seems like perhaps a Thursday morning, maybe the 26th of May. Is that something that would work for individuals?
It usually doesn't for me. This is just a rare Thursday. I'm on the Visit Winona board, and we have board meetings that day, unless we looked at like a 10 a.m. time.
Okay.
I could do it at 10 a.m.
Are there any other general conflicts with the Thursday morning on the 26th?
I have a meeting from 11 to 12:30 on the 26th. It can also be on Zoom. So if we met at 10, I could just, if we're not quite done by 11, I could just Zoom off to a different Zoom.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I do have another meeting that goes until 10:30, but I can see if I can either jump out of that a little bit early or maybe just come in a little bit late.
Sure.
Would a Wednesday morning work better?
We could also do a Wednesday morning. How about Wednesday, the 25th?
Could work.
Wednesday, May 25th at 9 o'clock.
I would be available at 9:30.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and book at 9:30 in the morning on the 25th of May. We will see you all again, either on Zoom or here in the city council chambers. And expect an email from us kind of going over the including the 2007 housing section that we want you to review in advance of that meeting. Again, take a look at the frameworks and the actual engagement results that we heard from phase 1 engagement. And until then, feel free to reach out to me or Carlos if you have any comments, questions, or concerns. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.